All right, hello everybody. I am back with another video or update on Rimo, and I just want to say thank you to everybody on the support of the last video. Lots of great feedback and lots of great results from that video, so really motivates me. So since the last update, I was able to implement a lot of core features and just features in general. So I thought what better way to show off all of these features and progress than to use Rimo itself. So let's get on to kind of the first feature, and the first feature being edges. I think we talked about edges in the last video, but basically each node will have 4 edges, which is a top, right, bottom, and left. And on these edges, we can add kind of what I'm calling a connector. For now, we have connector type of arrows or lines, and you're able to kind of run these connectors from edge to edge of each node. So if we follow our graph here, we can see we implemented arrows, which are these things right here. We've implemented connection dots, which are these 4 dots on the outside of each node that you'll see on the text and on the sticky note. And then we've also implemented a snapping with a snapping threshold and also a threshold to show the connection dots when dragging a connector. So let me demonstrate the connection points and kind of the snapping threshold, snapping, and then the threshold itself. So as you can see, when we hover on a connection point, we will actually have it highlight as blue to show us we are on this connection point. And we can click and drag, and as you can see, as we get close to a node, the connection points start to show. So that's kind of that threshold showing us where we can connect to. And then we have a snapping and snapping threshold. So as soon as I get close to a connection point, we will snap to it and then turn it green, telling us we've connected to it. We can let go and it'll draw it there. We have arrow style, which relates to the edge toolbar, which is basically this toolbar here, where we can edit and have this as a dotted arrow or line. We can have it as a straight line. We can actually delete this one. We can change having a start arrow or end arrow, as you can see, or we can have both. And then we can also just edit that as normal. Okay, so let's get into the actual implementation of the edges. So this is our interface for the edge, how it's actually saved inside a JSON file or our kind of quote unquote database. So a lot of this is self-explanatory, so I won't go over all of it, but I will go over some of the things. The first being the source and target point. So we want to know where this connector is going. And so we can have our source point, which is going to be an edge, and then we can have a target point. So we have top, right, bottom, and left, which is just relates to the edges of the node. So this one right here would be source of bottom and target to top. So we know where we're drawing this connector to. Then we have data, which just kind of the relates to the toolbar or this edge toolbar here of the styles. So we can have a solid or dashed line, start end arrow, stroke width, which we will use later, and arrow types, which for now we only have straight. And so we're storing this all in our edges array in our JSON file. This is what an edge looks like right here. As you can see, we can read pretty easily what this is. This edge is going from a bottom to the top, and then it has a end arrow but no start arrow, and it is a solid line. Okay, so let's go over the kind of detection for the connection points. How do we actually know that we are getting close to a point and we want to snap to a point? So like this. As you can see, we're not snapping up here, but as soon as we get close, we snap. So how is that actually done? So initially this hitbox was a circle, and it kind of just had a padding or margin off this this connection point here. So if it was here, it would just be a larger circle around that connection dot itself. But I ran into a kind of an issue where, as you can see, we have a transform point here, and if that circle kind of intersected with this square here, so we can actually hover and transform the width here, or even the height on the text nodes, because it would interfere having that kind of radius around it. So the solution was to actually make a square or rectangle actually to start on the edge here and then actually go outwards and around the dot, so we would not interfere with this transform node here. Basically that solution is just all here. Again, we're just making a rectangle that stops before we hit the actual node itself and kind of extends outwards to create that snapping and threshold effect. Okay, so let's get into the kind of proximity threshold of how close do we need to get to a connection point in order for it to show. And we are defining this value as 300. For now, that is kind of what I found is great and works. So basically we're checking for if we're close to that proximity threshold. If we are, we're gonna show the connection points of that node. And then that is the first check. And then the second check is right here, where we are actually going to snap to the closest point given kind of a 20 pixel area of the screen space. Okay, so this is the code that actually renders the connector. We have a start arrow, we have an end arrow, we have both, we have neither. Basically here, if we have a start arrow and an end arrow, we're going to render both of them. If we only have an end arrow, we're just going to use one arrow. If we have a start arrow, we actually need to reverse the points. So that's this right here, because the conva arrow component actually only supports an arrow at the end. So we just need to reverse the points, and that's done up here. And if we have a line, we simply just render the line component from React Conva as well. And the last thing I wanted to touch on is the edge toolbar, which is this right here. And simply, it is just buttons that when you press, it updates our ZooStand state. So as you can see here, we have handle style change, handle start arrow toggle, end arrow toggle, and delete. So as you see here, when we call update edge, all we're doing is changing the state of the edge based on which function is being called. Okay, so the next feature I'm going to go over is the sticky note tool. This is kind of a big one because in Miro, you use this one a lot, or at least I do, when brainstorming or creating kind of these graphs and things like that. So let's just get into the basic sticky note. If you click this tool up here on the toolbar, you can click and it'll create a sticky note. The dimensions of this, the height and width, are locked, so it's always going to be a square, and you're able just to make it into a rectangle. This is what Miro has, and I do like this functionality, although in the future, if there is requirements to make it different sizes or any size you want, I could add that, but for now, I'm just going to keep it this way. When you have a sticky note, you're able to actually do many things with it. So if we click on this sticky note here, as you can see, we have a few options in this toolbar, which I'll go over on later, but specifically for the sticky note, you're able to change the color. And then these are these are common to any node or tool that has text. So you're able to make this bold, italicize it, underline it, change the color of the text, and also the size. I'll go over this toolbar more later, but that's what you're able to do with the sticky note. Again, it's just the color. All right, so here's the sticky note node interface. It's pretty similar to the text node, but we just have a few more kind of like other fields here that are used for other things that are specific to the sticky note node. All right, so here's the function that actually handles the adding of the sticky note and actually creating it. As you can see on these lines, we're defining the properties of this new node. If you remember, our double click to edit is our default text, so we can edit this if we want, and this will be our default size for the actual sticky note, as well as the color and other stylings if we want it. And here is where the actual sticky note is being rendered. So simply what a sticky note is just a rectangle with a text on top of it. So that's all that really is, just text and then the rectangle. Now to kind of steer off course from the sticky note for a quick second, all the nodes are actually contained in a node container, and which this node container contains or kind of provides for us is hover state and outline, the connection points, and the selection state. All of these nodes kind of shared the same functionality, so I wanted to put it all into one file so that I could reuse it and wouldn't have to code it again later. And so you can see that is this file. It's not too long, it just handles some of that common functionality as I mentioned before. Okay, so I am going to go over the sticky note toolbar itself, but I'm going to get into the kind of higher up of that, and that is the node toolbar. So the node toolbar is obviously just a toolbar that shows up on each node. So again, a node is any of one of these things right here. So it's the sticky note node or text node. These are our nodes. And so what the toolbar is when we click on it, a toolbar will show telling us what can we do to modify this node. As I mentioned before, the sticky note has something unique to itself where you can change the background color. And then the text, you can see, doesn't have that actual background color option. But as you can see, we have the text options because these are, this node has text and this one has text. Obviously this one being the text node, this one being the sticky note node. Okay, so let's get into the code for the toolbars and how I actually implemented this. So each node or tool will actually have its own toolbar that we can actually go in and define what options do we want to actually display for that node. So as you can see, we're in the sticky note toolbar, and here we have defined that we want to use our font size selector, text style buttons, our color picker, as well as our background color picker. So these are actually components that we've defined ourselves. So if we go into background color, for example, as you can see, background color, we've defined our colors here, and here's where we handle the actual changing of the background color for that node. So we're able to reuse this for other nodes if we want to, and if we want the option, we can just add it into their node toolbar, and it'll be there as an option. You can see this better in comparing the sticky note toolbar and the text note toolbar, where they share that font size selector, the text style, and the color picker. And if we go back to the application itself, you can see that we have that font size, the style, and then the color. So they share the same exact thing. So all we have to do is put in our component that we've made, and we can just use that and it'll be the same exact thing. So just to reiterate, we have a background color picker, our font size selector, and our font color picker. These are the only kind of options you have now for a node, but obviously with the structure I just showed you, this is very easily expandable and can be scaled to many, many more options, and it very easily can you add a option to any node toolbar you want. And to go over this here, basically, again, we're just having a toolbar per a node, defining which options would you actually want in this toolbar. Okay, so let's get into the sidebar. Now the sidebar was more kind of like a quality of life improvement for myself while developing, because I kind of got annoyed of the previous one that wasn't too rich in features. And let me get into what those features actually are. So the first feature is we render the files as rows with their extensions now. So as you can see, these are the JSON files, we have markdown files, and we also have folders as well. That kind of leads me to the folder support. So we now support folders in this sidebar where you can view things in it. So we just want to move this one in here. You can view this one in here. And we can also create and delete folders. So up here, you can create a new folder, or you can create a new board, as well as we can drag files into folders as I just showed you, and we can also drag it out. So if we drag this one out, or drag this one in. All right, and the next feature is this markdown node. Now this markdown node is kind of like a work in progress at the moment. I recently just implemented this, but basically what it is if you have a markdown file, you're able to drag this markdown file into the board and reference it so that you can read and write just from the board itself. So as you can see, this markdown node references this test markdown file. If we go into here, you can see that file here. I implemented a very, very basic markdown renderer and editor. So you're basically just able to view and edit. So you can just type into here and type your markdown into here and then view it. You're also able to drag a markdown file from the sidebar into the actual board, so you can add it from there. So if I just drag this test2, drag it, and I can put it in here. So the last thing I want to touch on is other improvements. This is not necessarily features, but more of kind of structure changes and performance enhancements. The first one being kind of common things. If you remember, we have a common node toolbar, and we also have that options like the text sizing and the background colors as things we can import into each node toolbar. And then for the nodes, we have a node container, which contains, if you remember, all of our common features that a node has. And one thing I'm trying to do is not storing specific fields and rather handle them app side. Now, what does this actually mean? So for things like text style, like bold, italicized, and underline, instead of actually storing the default case where it's not bold, we can just actually not have it in the file. And then when it is bold and it is true, we can have it in the file. This means that if we don't have it in the file, we can assume that we don't have a bold text style. And if we do have it, then obviously it is going to be bold. So as you can see here, we have that testing text stored right here. And as you can see, we don't have a bold field anywhere here. Therefore, it's not bold. Once we do go to make it bold, as you can see here, we do have a bold as true now. This is the same for italicized and underlined. So if we go back, as you can see, we have these two now. And if we delete the underline, we don't have the underline. And I kind of want to follow this design throughout the application to cut down as much as I can so that this JSON file doesn't get really, really huge. Now, lots of improvements were made for the performance of the application. In one case, we were doing excessive re-renders from store subscriptions. So basically, components were subscribing to large portions of our Zoostan store, causing basically all the subscribed components to re-render whenever any part of the state has changed. And obviously, this is really, really bad because when we pan, for example, our position will change and will cause re-renders of basically everything on the infinite canvas, such as like the nodes and edges and connection points. So that was really, really bad. So that was changed, so we didn't do that. And these grid lines in the background here were actually regenerated on every render, which caused hundreds of lines to be drawn, and that was also fixed. So here are the current plans for the next video. The first being frames or grouping. So if we were to draw a frame around this whole entire node here, or all of these nodes, and we put all of those nodes in the frame, then when moving the frame, they should all move with it. So anything inside of a frame should move with it and be kind of grouped basically. I want to implement more rich or just text options in general. So as you can see here, we don't even have the option to align the text yet. So like middle align, left align, right align, I want to add that and just some other more options. Another thing is to improve the sidebar. As I mentioned before, it's not too feature rich and there's some quirks that I need to kind of work out. So I want to do that in the next video. And then I also want to improve the markdown tool. Right now, I feel like it could be a really, really helpful tool and a helpful node. So I want to get that really polished out and in a place where it's actually usable more than it is right now. And then I also want to support images. So I want to be able to drag an image and just have it in the board basically. I know this video was a little long, so if you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.